What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with our Defining Dad Bod Inner Circle. Welcome to our Faithful 40 Town Hall Q&A. By popular vote, those of you who've jumped on and those of you who haven't have requested that we'll talk about exercise programming this evening. So I've got a few things I'll tell you. I'm going to try not to pack an entire master's degree into 20 minutes. Talk really fast. But I do plan to talk through some exercise programming methodology. And then I've covered this a lot on the podcast, so I expand on a lot of these topics with regard to exercise. And so hopefully if you have any questions, you can reach out and I'll make sure and direct you to those resources. And then after that, we'll talk through our group's questions. So I'm excited to hang out with you guys who will journal mindset, nutrition, and exercise every day with me for 40 days. High five to all of you. Wonderful. All right, so let's do this thing. First, you'll notice I have a picture of a scalpel and a hammer in the bottom of the slide. And what I hope to drive home with this picture is the idea that there's a difference between training and exercising. So tonight we'll be talking specifically about training. When I was asked to talk about programming, I think of that as training. And training is the idea that we're going to use exercise specifically, like a scalpel, like a surgeon would use a scalpel to make tiny little changes to ourselves in order to progress us with adaptations. And there's ways you do that with cardiovascular exercise and resistance training. That's different from the blunt force approach of a hammer, right? So when we use exercise like a hammer, it's like, how many calories did I burn? Work harder, do more burpees, right? And when you use exercise like a hammer, you'll get the results of using exercise like a hammer. You might actually build something cool. I just built a shed in my backyard. A hammer was very necessary, right? You might end up with something cool. However, it's possible that with intelligent exercise programming, you could have gotten there sooner and with a little less pain than using your hammer. So that's what we're talking through this evening. So first, really important concept for us to jump through together, and that is, let me move my camera guys here. That is acute variables. And so what you'll see in front of you is the idea of periodization. Periodization is the idea that given a particular time frame, you'll be working on specific volumes and intensities. So you'll notice in the bottom left there, I have a picture of volume is high in the very beginning, and then skill and intensity are low in the very beginning. And then as an exercise program progresses, then let me mute everybody here because I don't want to kill us with random sounds from, there we go. So in periodization, you'll start with your program with a relatively high level of volume in a specific phase of training, and then the intensity will be relatively low. And then as you progress through your exercise program, your intensity will increase and the volume will decrease. Now that doesn't make any sense to you if you don't know what volume and intensity actually mean in exercise. And so, I'm sorry, I can hear people like giggling and stuff. I'm gonna kill the sound from somebody. Just a second. Mute. Wish I was better at Zoom. Hang with me. There we go. Yeah, please mute yourself. That would make my life a lot easier. Thank you. So anyway, when you're exercise programming, it's important to understand in the big picture, we call this the macro cycle. We start with our volume and then we increase intensity over time. Now, the picture that you see in the bottom left here is considering that you might be a conditioned individual. A conditioned individual in the exercise literature means that you've been exercising consistently 4 days a week for 6 months. I know it's a really loose definition, right? But that is the definition of conditioned individual. 4 days a week for 6 months consistently. And then as a conditioned individual, then you can arrive in this place of periodization where you start in hypertrophy. That's at the bottom of that periodization graph there, hypertrophy. That's muscle growth, hyper, over, trophy, growth, overgrowth of muscle cells, hypertrophy. And then as you progress through periodization, you get into strength and power, which is heavier weights, more explosive repetitions. And then you peak. This is anything from if we're doing sports specific things, or let's say you're getting ready for your sister's wedding. and then you're doing some more intense stuff in order to further drive that body composition where you want to see it, right? That's peaking. It could be things like sports specific training. It could be high intensity interval training. It could be things like fasted cardio. There's a lot of stuff that can go into peaking. And then you have your event or your competition or your benchmark, and then there's a deload or a resting period. Now, if you're in the phases of training where you're trying to drop weight, a specific amount of weight, let's say you want to lose 100 pounds or something along those lines, then what happens is you actually be rolling through this macro cycle over time with the overall goal of continually losing weight or losing fat, as I've talked about in the past. For me specifically, I'm training for an obstacle course race. If COVID doesn't ruin all obstacle course races as of October, probably will. Oh well, I'm training for it anyway, and I'll hang on some monkey bars or something. We'll see how that goes. But I'm still riding that macro cycle as well. So a macro cycle could be 10 weeks, it could be 12 weeks, it could be 16 weeks, depending on what goal you're working toward. And so tonight, as we're talking about exercise programming, it's important that you understand that we're not talking about doing the perfect movements for your best back muscles. We're talking about arranging your exercise program such that you create adaptations and build it over time. That's the scalpel approach versus the hammer approach. And if you are taking notes and you don't hear anything else I say tonight, then remember that the acute variables of exercise programming are volume and intensity. In an exercise program, volume is the amount of work you're doing. That's the total time that you're doing cardiovascular exercise. That's the number of repetitions, that's the number of sets in a workout. That's volume. And then intensity is the level of work you're actually doing in your exercise. And that is load, like how heavy it is. Your rest periods, things get more intense as rest periods get shorter, right? Time under tension, that's how long the muscle's actually working or how quickly it's working. And then RPE, that's rate of perceived exertion. So as we continue through here, one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I program my cardiovascular exercise? This is a lot of science packed into just one picture to make life a little easier for you if you're creating your own workout programs. But what you'll see in the middle here is a pyramid I've built for you, and we've got 80-20. 80% of our time is spent near the bottom of this pyramid, whereas 20% of our time is spent near the top of this pyramid, right? The bottom of this pyramid is volume. We're working to increase the number of minutes we're doing cardiovascular exercise. And then as we move into higher peak phases of training, we're trying to increase the amount of intensity that we're doing with our cardiovascular exercise. So in the beginning of phases of training, we're trying to teach our body to burn fat well as a fuel source. And that we do by adding minutes at lower intensities. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 there. Those are our heart rate zones. And I'll talk about rate of perceived exertion in a second, but those are the zones of proximal development for cardiovascular programming. We burn fat as fuel. Then when we get good at that, we work to grow our engine size. That's the middle of the pyramid there at a moderate intensity of cardiovascular exercise. And then at the very top, we're fine-tuning our engine. We're working to increase our ability to use carbohydrates well as a fuel source and to increase our overall metabolic output. And that's what we do with cardiovascular programming. I've taken the second to put rate of perceived exertion right next to heart rate zones here. So if you're used to heart rate zones 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that correlates to how hard something feels when you do them, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this workout? A 1 to 3 down there is in our zones 1 and 2. That's our base building or our base foundational cardio. And then our 4, 5, and 6 there, that's in zones 2 and 3. We can call that moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise. And then when we get to 7, 8, and 9, we're talking about high intensity exercise, maybe even a 10, but I prefer you don't die in our workouts, right? So we don't die. We get really close sometimes in our peak phases of training, but we don't die. So, and that actually correlates to what kind of fuel we're using as well. If things feel really easy, you're likely using fat as a fuel source. And I don't mean like I could do this all day long. I mean, I'm sweating, I'm working, but I'm not. I could do this for a while. I could do this for 10 minutes. I could do this for 20 minutes. You know, psychologically speaking, it's not brutal, right? And then in the middle there, we've got a mix. That's carbohydrates and fats. That's when we're increasing our intensities to that 4, 5, and 6 range. And then when we start getting above our anaerobic threshold, that's the VT2 there, phenylary threshold 2, then we're burning carbohydrates primarily as a fuel source during the actual activity. And then thereafter, after the activity, we've increased our fat burn as well. So what does this look like in a program? Well, remember the big picture, the macro cycle, that's 12 to 16 weeks. This is a small picture of that, right? This is showing you what progression looks like over 3 weeks. So let's say I'm working with a sample person here. I just made some generic things around what I look at when I'm programming for somebody. So the goal for this person is cardiovascular health and muscle growth. Their conditioning is they have been exercising 4 days a week for over 6 months. They have about 90 minutes a week that they can work within 3 separate sessions. And their favorite favorite modality is outdoor running. And Gene and I both fist bump. So the goal here is, how do I progress this person? So notice in the top right there, we've got the percentages of time they're spending in zone 1 and 2 versus zone 3 and 4. Remember, I said we're spending the bulk of our time in zones 1 and 2, whereas we're spending a small amount of time in our zones 3 and 4. And you can see how these minutes that I've put here break down over their progression. So in sample week 1, on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, they're doing their cardio. They're doing a 45-minute bout in zone 1 and 2. They're doing a 20-minute bout in zones 1 and 3. That would be a moderate intensity interval. They're holding that interval for 3 minutes and resting for 2 minutes. And they're doing that 4 times in that program. And then on Saturday, they're working for 15 minutes in high intensity, right? That's zone 1 and zone 4. So they're spending 30 seconds, that's 0.5 minutes in zone 4. They're resting for 2 minutes in zone 1, and they're doing that 6 times. So in the next week, how do we progress that? Well, we're progressing with volume for this person. We're progressing in volume. And so what we're trying to do is add the minutes. We're trying to add some minutes to their time. So notice it's really conservative, okay? We didn't start with 45 minutes and then go, hey, we're going to do an hour and a half of cardio next week, right? Woohoo, you did 45. That's not how things work. We take small steps forward because the body adapts slowly and progressively. And even the tissues in us that don't adapt slowly and progressively, they depend on tissues that adapt slowly and progressively. And so if you go too fast, you end up hurt. I'm sure we've all been in that boat before, right? So week 2 here, we just add 5 minutes to their base cardio. It's about the same for Thursday and Friday. The next week, we actually add 5 minutes to their moderate intensity cardio, and it stays that way. And if you had to project this over a period of 12 weeks, you would note that we would increase in volume until we hit their maximum volume, and then we would work to increase their intensity. So by the end of their macro cycle, when they're peaking, they're doing a lot more work in the higher intensity training zones, but we've built them up to that point, right, through volume and then intensity. So I'm going to pause for a second. I didn't plan to do this. I planned to talk through this exercise stuff and then take your questions, but I see a couple of puzzled looks, so why not stop and address them while we're here? If you've got a question, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll be happy to field it as we're talking about cardiovascular programming, and then we'll hit weight. What's going on out there? Can I just say I love Gene's smile, your grin. Looks like that run was good for your psyche, brother.
Hey, Gene, I didn't see these people hanging out down here. Tim Samples on here.
Yeah, we got some all-stars on this call.
Right? Alex, I was going to tell you that I missed that little graph up there in the top right. That's when we first started working together, you would give me those. That brings back memories.
Yeah, do you want it again? I didn't know you wanted it.
I miss it. I'm gonna have to make some.
Miss seeing your progressive time there. So did I just explain this really well? Did it go over your guys' head, or do we not have any questions at all about it?
I think you explained it well. The only thing I guess I can imagine anyone maybe questioning is, how do you know your zone? How do you know?
How do you know what zone you're training in? Is that what you're saying? Like, how do I know what zone I'm in when I'm working out?
Exactly. Like, you know, it's by your heart rate, but then there are factors that play into that as well.
Great question. So we call that the gold versus silver method, right? So the gold method of heart rate training is testing your zones based on your actual mixture of carbohydrates and fats as a fuel source being burned, and that requires cardiorespiratory testing. So you would actually stick a mask on your face and go do that whole bit. I've got one in my closet, actually. It's kind of fun. But most people don't have access to that technology. There's no reason for most people to own that. And most people don't have access to go. Now most gyms are closed anyway, so you can't even go to the places that have it. But the next best thing, and it actually correlates really well, is what we call the silver test. And that is this rate of perceived exertion scale that you should be able to see on the screen in front of you, which is the 1 through 5, right beside the 1 through 10 scale. How you feel is actually a fantastic indicator. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, how you feel is actually a fantastic indicator of how close you are to this zone, right? Now, I've shown 5 zones here. What really matters is 3. The base intensity, that's below when we start burning a large amount of carbohydrates and fats together. That's base intensity. And that's on a scale of 1 to 10, we're talking 2 and 3. Like for most of us, that would be a light jog, right? There are some people who that might be a walk up a hill. And there are some athletic people that I know that they can, run at a 8-minute, 7-minute per mile pace at their base, right? But on a scale of 1 to 10, if you ask them, how are you feeling? They could carry on a conversation. They'd say, hey, probably a 3 out of 10, no big deal. I could do this all day. That's base cardio. Now, that's slightly above activity, right? So let's say I went for a walk around the block with you guys and hung out and had a conversation with you. I'm not exercising. That's activity at that point. But if we start jogging and I'm starting to have to control my breathing to get my sentences out to you, that's that base intensity. The next intensity up from that would be your zone 3 technically, but it's that moderate intensity. And that's where we're burning about the same amount of fat and carbohydrates at the same time. And for many people, what this feels like is I'm exercising now. My mouth comes open. Like I'm actually starting to mouth breathe in my workout here. And then if you are talking to me, I can talk to you, but I can't get a full sentence or two out. I'm talking between breaths here. And that's that rate of perceived exertion, that 4, 5, and 6. And then a high intensity zone, that's the third zone that matters, where we're fine tuning things. The best way I could tell you to know whether or not you're there is you can really only hold that for about 20 to 30 seconds. So if the intensity is high enough, you can really only hold that for about 20 to 30 seconds before you need to stop. One of my favorite things or ways I've heard that described to me is that you're mentally looking for a way out. So you're in that zone when you get to 10 seconds, you get to 15 seconds, and you're like, all right, how much more time we got here? Like that's I've got to get to that dumpster. All right, I'm going to get to that dumpster, and you're like, that dumpster is really far away. It's not getting any closer. That's the mental feeling around that 7, 8, 9 range. So that's a really good question. If you're not using heart rate training zones, then rate of perceived exertion is actually the next best thing. And then some of you have probably heard of the bronze method. So if you pick up like a heart rate monitor or something and you type in your age, they're going to do 220 minus your age. And then your zones are going to be like 60 and 70% and 80% of that and 90% of that and whatnot. And so that being said, the silver method is actually a little more accurate than the bronze method. And really good trainers who don't have access to that technology actually use both of them. They use the bronze method to start the heart rate zones, and then they use rate of perceived exertion to adjust them, because not everybody that's the same age is at the same level of conditioning. So that was a good question, and I could say a lot more about that, but does that help?
Yeah, that helps. So just basically go off of how you're feeling. And I think, actually, I was going to mention this to you too, but my zones have changed recently. So what used to be my base isn't even hard enough now. So I have to go harder. I check my heart rate and it was up to the same level where my base used to be, but I'm like, this is way too easy. So just kind of adjust as you just kind of gauge it by how you're
Yes,
feeling.
yeah. And you'll notice with regard to heart rate, one of the reasons that I like to use rate of perceived exertion is sometimes depending on what kind of state your body's in, it can really mess with your heart rate. Like you're in the heat of Texas, right? If you tried to work out outside right now, your heart rate would be significantly higher, even at the same workload. And it might not feel harder to you, but that's cardiac drift in response to heat, right? And then similarly, let's say that you had an illness recently and you were, 2 weeks down for the count. When you come back to exercise, your heart rate will come up much faster for a while before you recondition to back to lower heart rate zones. But as you start to develop in later conditioning phases, you start to develop a capacity to work out at those higher heart rates, then you'll notice it doesn't feel nearly as hard as it used to. So yeah, the heart rate zone thing, it's a really helpful measure to have around, but it's not you don't need to live and die by it. If you're doing base training today, just don't go sprinting, please. And don't kick your butt too hard at the 30-minute mark. Good question.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else out there? All right. Resistance training. This is what you're all here for, right? we don't do cardio. We just lift weights. We like weights. So nice. He flexed on me. All right. So there's a number of things we could say about resistance training. Primarily, I find it very helpful to use the NASM OPT model. That's the National Academy of Sports Medicine, to help people understand how everything really fits together. Because the stages of resistance training, very similar to cardiovascular exercise, are volume and intensity. You start by increasing the volume, and then as the phases progress and continue, you increase intensity until peak, and then you do a recovery phase, right? So in resistance training, there's a lot more variables, okay? In cardio, it's like, okay, you're running. It's base day, run slow. It's moderate day, run faster. It's high intensity day, run really fast for short periods of time and then run slow. And then that's it. And I just explained that there's a little more to doing it intelligently, right? But those are the variables. It doesn't get much more difficult than that. With resistance training, we've got how much time do we rest between sets? How heavy should my exercise be? If I get tired at the 8th rep, should I push through the 12th, or should I save myself for the next 2 sets, right? There's a lot of questions in there about how we create adaptations through resistance training, and this gets quite a bit more complicated, right? So the first thing I would say is that when it comes to creating a good workout, it's important that the workout has pieces, right? And this is derived directly from how we train athletes. Some of you might not train like athletes right now, and that's okay. So you won't have all of the elements of this in a workout. And I'm going to bring this all together in a bit in an actual, what a week to week looks like. So hang with me. I'm going to say a lot of things first. So we have a warm up. Please don't skip your warm up. Jog real light for 5 minutes, stretch, get your mind right. It's called a warm up because we're actually raising the internal temperature of the body. If you just go do deadlifts right now, you're not going to perform nearly as well as if you ran for 5 minutes and then went and did deadlifts. It's just not how things work. And then if you are going to do core, balance, reactive training, or speed, agility, and quickness, if you are going to do those things, then it's best done in an activating way at the beginning of the workout. So let's say I'm going to have you do really heavy deadlifts. I would like to warm you up with something like a bird dog or a cobra, right? Or if I was going to have you practice sprinting, it's a really bad idea to stick that at the very end of a workout when your legs are tired, right? Because that's a good way to pull a hammy. Anybody ever been there? I get an amen. All right. I'm like, ugh. At once upon a time, I was like, all right, I'm wore out. It was a great workout. Now I'm going to do a burnout. I'm going to go sprint 10 times. And that's how you injure yourself. Because notice at the very end here is flexibility. Sprinting is not flexibility, all right? So then we have our, so if you're going to do things like high knees or jumps, like plyometric work or something along those lines, it's best done before you wear yourself out in resistance training. And then notice we've got warm-up, core training, balance training, reactive training, SAQ, and cardio. And then we have resistance training. For most of us, this is going to be the bulk of our workout time, resistance training. This is the 30 minutes, the 40 minutes, the 60 minutes that you probably spend working out proper. right? We're doing leg press, we're doing squats, we're doing deadlifts. I guess I'm in a leg mood today. Like those were the first three things that came to mind. Those are going to fall kind of in that resistance training phase. And so the reason this is important is because this keeps us from injuring ourselves in the workout session itself. Now, what do we actually do when we're working out? Well, we use different acute variables to achieve different adaptations. So if you notice there, at the top of this table, this chart, it says type. That's what type of training we're actually doing, what type of exercise we're actually doing. You see reactive strength, you see maximal strength, you see max rep, exhaustive. And then we have beside it the goal or ability. I would call this adaptation. This is the thing that we're going for, the thing that we're trying to change, right? And that could be like mechanical muscle power. It could be muscle size. It could be muscle strength. It could be muscle endurance, right? Whatever we're trying to change about the muscle fiber is directly related to everything to the right on this table. That's our rep range, how many repetitions we're doing of this exercise. This is our load, how heavy this exercise is. Sets, how many sets of this work we're actually doing during this particular workout. And then the tempo, that's how slow we are going down, how fast we are going up, and whether or not we do any pausing. And then our rest period, how long we rest in between. And so this chart is I mean, if you want my job, this is you have to know this thing pretty inside and out, right? But and you don't need to memorize this. We'll talk about this more when we get to the actual workouts themselves. But this chart is what we know from a research perspective, all boiled into a table, right? Because we do these things in exercise physiology. We take a group of athletes over here, and we say, you guys are going to do 5 sets of 10 deadlifts at the heaviest weight you can for 10 reps, and you're going to rest 1 minute, and then you're going to do that again, and you're going to do that stupid program for 8 weeks, all right? And then you guys are going to do deadlifts, but you're going to do 20 repetitions at a light weight. You're going to rest for 30 seconds, and then we're going to see who progresses in the deadlift and who gets injured. Basically, that's what we do. And so then we test all these metrics. Did they change in body composition? Did their muscles grow? Was there better muscle stimulation in different like core muscles and glutes and all that stuff? Did their deadlift go up or down? Did they report exhaustion? Did they get injured? And so we do these studies. And so then we find if you want a particular adaptation, this is how you have to exercise the body in order to get there, right? And that's what this table is telling us. That's what's here on the table. And then over here on the, I think it might be your right, that way, there we go. On your right, my left, there's also, I made sure to add the chart for heart rate training here as well. Below VT1 and fat max, VT2 and anaerobic threshold. That's how you would create adaptations specifically for an athlete for cardiometabolic exercise. So this is an actual screenshot of a program that I've created, and we're going to go through weeks 1 through 4, all the way through 16. But just to show you what this actually looks like put all together, right? So in a week, I would have a workout, stability A, and then I have a cardiovascular day, which would be a foundation or base training day. And then this person gets to rest and stretch. And then this person would do workout B, stability B, and then they would do some moderate intensity intervals. They'd have a body weight day, and then they rest and stretch on day 7, right? So that's 2 rest days, 5 workout days. 3 days in there are resistance, and 2 days are cardio. And you'll notice from the exercise perspective, they have single leg glute bridges and 1 1/4 air squats and dumbbell Romanian deadlifts with the right number of sets and repetitions. And if you guys want a copy of this, just PM me and I'll send you a link. Shoot me a message on Facebook. I'll send you a link to it so that you can reference it later. And there's a little bit that's not on this picture. It just wouldn't fit in the picture to have all 7 across there and down. But this is what a foundation phase looks like, right, from a weight training cardiovascular perspective. So after doing that for about 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the person, and progressive progression-wise, they're trying to add a little bit of weight. We're trying to add mostly cardiovascular work and volume to their program to get them better at burning fat as a fuel source usually. Then we progress to endurance. And endurance, the weights go up a little bit, the repetitions go up a little bit, and the movements become a little more complex, right? And you'll see that this person's doing a little longer base cardiovascular exercise work, and they're doing some high intensity intervals in their program, whereas before they were only doing moderate intensity intervals. So this is day 36 through day 42 for this particular person, but they're still resting 2 times a week, so that's cool. Then in hypertrophy, this is my favorite phase. Yay, big muscles. And you get more carbs during this phase. So nutritionally speaking, this phase makes me very happy. But this is like I call it the carrot cake phase. There we go. Get carrot cake during hypertrophy. In hypertrophy, the volume stays relatively high. This is really where those lines start to cross. Volume stays high, intensity starts to come up. So the weights get heavier. You get a little more rest in between sets, but the weights get heavier, right? And then from a cardiovascular perspective, this person's now moved on to just intervals. They're doing moderate intensity, then they're sprinting, and then they're getting a little bit of rest before doing it again, right? And you'll notice in this phase, they've actually gone to 6 days a week of training instead of 5. So we've split them up into legs, back and buys, full body, and chest, and that's their hypertrophy week. And then we're starting to get to the athleticism stuff, the power-based training. And this stuff is hard enough in a session that a lot of times I usually back off of the high-intensity interval stuff because they're doing so much explosive work in the actual workout themselves. In an athleticism phase, when we're really hitting those higher intensity exercises and higher intensity loads, you're usually pretty smoked in the weight workout itself. The weight workout is cardio, unless you have something specific we're working toward. I like to back off the cardio a little bit here. So you'll notice their workouts look quite a bit different. They've got a little bit of hypertrophy here in their back day in the middle of the week. Then they've got athleticism 1 and 2. So they're doing things like single arm kettlebell press and eccentric single leg squats and explosive push-ups as a unit together. And then toes to bar box jump overs and freestanding handstands. So that's a pretty intense workout there. And then on athleticism 2, they're doing things like the deadlift, the bent over barbell row, dual overhead kettlebell carry, also pretty intense there. This particular person really wanted to work on their arms, so they have a workout that I like to call hero arms, which varies depending on what hero I'm working with, but this guy liked Thor, so we called it Thor. Anyway, so this is his arm workout, and then notice he gets 2 days a week of rest here because the intensity is so high, and the volume doesn't need to be as high in this phase of training. So I've said a lot of things here. What I hope you take away from it is that exercise can either be a scalpel or a hammer. And generally what I work to do with my clients and what I hope you work to do with yourself when you're exercising is to use exercise intelligently to create the adaptations that you're looking to create. I will say that there are some weeks of my life that exercise needs to be a hammer to beat back the demons. And I'm not being flippant about that. Like sometimes you just need to kick your butt, and that's good. but most of the time, that whole thing notwithstanding, most of the time, from a programming perspective, exercise can be very intelligent. It can help you achieve goals depending on how you program these things together. So that's what you guys told me you wanted to talk about, and so that's what I talked about. Now, I might have generated some questions. I might have spoken either too low or too high for your taste. So how's everybody doing, and what questions exist in the world that I can field for you? Bring it, Gene. What's up, man?
Okay, you were the last phase there with the athleticism.
Yes, sir.
I've always done an excessive amount of cardio because used to be a really fat guy. So and I find that to maintain my weight these days, I have to step up about 300 extra calories a day of athletic burn, whether I do it walking, hill climbing, or whatever. And so using this thing here, I can set whatever workout I'm doing. If I'm doing a run, do a GPS, doing treadmill, swimming, whatever. And it's got a weightlifting setting on it too, so I can track the entire session. And recently I've been studying what my heart is doing while I'm lifting. And because I never really tracked that, I just look at daily totals of what your heart did all day long. And there's a big, orange and red section where I was at the gym, but narrowing it down
right.
by the workout and going back and say, okay, what did I do? Bring up my pad, and I'm going to kill these dogs. Bring up this pad, and I'm going to kill you both. To the moon, Alice. Anyway, so I bring up the track of that lifting session, and I was like, holy crap. I didn't feel like I was in cardio. I was getting jiggy with it. I was, working my sets, and I'm really working in a 3-1-4, eccentric 3 seconds, clench for a second, and concentric for 4 seconds. I'm seeing some gains doing that, but then I got to wondering, well, am I holding my dadgum breath too much? What's going on here? Why is my heart rate 138, 142 up in that range when I'm just lifting? And it's just something I didn't notice before, but I was kind of concerned about, okay, what am I not breathing right? That's the question. Sorry it took so long to get there.
No, it's fine. That's a really good question. So I want to talk about 2 things there because it's a really good question. First, the question of at what level does our heart rate matter in our weightlifting sessions, right? And the more intense the weightlifting session is, we'll talk about it physiologically in a second, the more intense the weightlifting session is, you are without a doubt getting into your higher intensity training zones. So I brought this picture back up here to show you in the initial stages of training, when you're doing like lightweight with high repetitions, your heart rate won't get nearly as high because it's not as hard of work, right? Even if you're breathing well in a set of 25, your heart rate's not nearly going to get as high as if you did 8 really hard deadlifts, right? It's not gonna go up as high. And so what happens is you'll notice in the lower stages of training, our cardio has a lot more room to do higher intensity intervals, like moderate intensity, high intensity. You'll see that. But as our weight training gets harder and harder, if we're going to stick to this 80-20, we're going to let our body adapt to the foundational phases of training, and we're not going to be too intense on ourselves. Then you notice that in my program, I like to recommend a significant amount of base training to offset that because of the weights. Now, what you asked there though was, am I doing something wrong in my weights that my heart rate's getting up so high? And no, you're not. You're creating an oxygen deficit by training high intensity weights. And when you do a high intensity set, it's not actually during the set that your heart rate goes up. Like if you track your heart rate during like a really heavy set of eight bench presses, your heart rate's going to be pretty linear. Actually, it's going to go up nice and slow through each rep. You set the weight down and then your heart rate starts to skyrocket, because what's happening is you've created an oxygen deficit in the muscle itself. And now your body has signaled that you've built up carbon dioxide from the carbs you just burned. You've built up carbon dioxide, and that increases your heart rate, right? So when that happens, you're going to elevate heart rate for a bit, and it's going to stay up there until it recovers back down. So when you do intense weights, check it out. Like look at your heart rate and watch what happens after you lift, because it's right after the heavy lift that your heart rate is going to spike and then come back down. You're not doing anything wrong. It's not actually breathing during the lift that's getting you. It's that you're in that ATP-CP pathway and glycolytic pathway of training, and you're creating an oxygen debt with the movement, and that's what's spiking your heart rate. Breathing, like anatomically, if you take a breath while you're doing a set of 8 deadlifts, the oxygen doesn't have enough time to go from your mouth to your lungs, to your bloodstream, to your quadriceps muscle and glutes to make a difference. But if you do a set of 20 deadlifts, that's enough time for the oxygen to get there and make a difference. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's just, I'm working with old parts here, and since I started this about 8 years ago, it's like I've been religiously conscious about breathing while doing heavy lifting, especially. And, and so, I thought, good God Almighty, I can't be doing it that wrong, because, I feel like $1 million and I'm handsome as hell. So,
Nice. Nice.
Okay, that's the dad joke. I'm out of here.
Actually, they teach in strength and conditioning. There's a maneuver called the Valsalva maneuver,
Right.
and if like unless you have like really high blood pressure or prone to strokes or something, the Valsalva maneuver is actually in it's usually the 4 to 6 repetition range, but you can do it for more. You're intentionally holding your breath to
Right.
create a little more intra-abdominal pressure, meaning like in a deadlift, you'll lift heavier if you take a breath just before and you forcibly press that into your breathing mechanism. I'm saying that really stupid. You forcibly press against. You guys know what I'm talking about. Everybody imagine getting hit by a soccer ball in the gut. That's the Valsalva maneuver or Valsalva technique. And what that does for you is it increases the amount of core stability that you have in that brief moment. And some research studies suggest that it actually increases the amount of neurological power that your brain stem and your spinal column have to talk to your other muscles. Just for a brief second, but it's enough to make a difference in weight training. So I don't think you're doing anything wrong. Don't hold your breath for a set of 12 probably, but but find your breath within the first few reps, and I wouldn't be too concerned about your heart rate spiking after a set.
Yeah, I've seen some of those Olympic deadlifters pass out. And
it can go too far. That's for sure. I wouldn't advise it. But
brother,
you're not doing 1 rep max. You're not doing 1 rep max attempts anyway, right?
No, sir. No, sir.
Yeah.
I'm taking care of those.
I like a 3 or 4 rep max. I don't need a pissing contest personally.
Yeah, at this point, we're about keeping this machine alive for a long time, so we don't do crazy.
All right. I like it. Appreciate it, Gene. What other questions are out there, guys? I'm not trying to give you epilepsy, by the way. I'm just trying to spur any questions from a programming perspective you might have.
I guess I have a question. Did it show anywhere on your charts there how much rest you should have in between reps on your different phases?
Yes. So it's
maybe my box is hiding it here. There we go. It was hidden. I see it.
Okay, perfect. So the stair step model, the foundations and the endurance and stuff, it doesn't correlate perfectly with this. The idea though is that as volume increases and intensity increases, as volume decreases and intensity increases, you need more rest. What you'll notice here actually is a really helpful rule of thumb. See in the bottom there, it says it's all burgundy. Is that the right color? Light burgundy?
Yeah, salmon.
And then in the top it's green salmon. That's probably better. Yeah. My canned salmon's like darker than that, but but some people don't like canned fish. Just like I'm muting somebody. Because we have a little feedback there. The muscular hypertrophy stuff requires less rest than the neural adaptive stuff on average, right? So when we're doing something heavy, like really heavy for 6 to 8 repetitions, 4 to 6 repetitions, that heavy stuff, or the reactive stuff where we're trying to bounce really hard off the ground or jump on a box, or we're doing, I don't know, sprinting drills, high knees. In your case, things like a plyo box jump, that needs a lot more rest than something like dumbbell bench press, right? So in the lower phases of training in general, the rest periods are really short. 30 seconds tops, maybe 60, depending on how much weight you're able to use, right? For the most part, if you're able to complete your set, then your rest period's good in the lower phases of training. As you start to go up in the difficulty of phases of training, when we start talking about hypertrophy and strength, the rest periods get much longer, right? In hypertrophy, you might rest 60 seconds, 90 seconds, sometimes as high as 3 minutes, depending on the intensity of the set, right? But where things get a little interesting is when you're starting to talk about reaction, right? Because you can split the athleticism, the power phase, up into athletic endurance. So you don't get a lot of rest when you're being explosive there, and there's a different adaptation that comes from that versus imagine soccer drills. I don't know if anybody here has played soccer before, but that would be a good example. You're not getting a lot of rest. You're taxing that power pathway. But then when you're doing things like your 3-rep max clean and jerk, you get lots of rest because the clean and jerk is very neurologically taxing, right? Which is my primary quip against CrossFit boxes usually, is because people are trying to do really heavy weight, they're not taking any rest, and so it increases the incidence of injury. I'm not saying CrossFit's silly, I'm just saying that the risk of injury gets higher when you take somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and they're trying to put their 3-rep max clean and jerk up over their head for a 7-minute AMRAP. Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but it's as the phases get more intense, the rest periods get longer.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Makes sense completely. I just looking at this chart here, I'd never rest for 1 minute. So I need to reevaluate, apparently.
You're a go person, and I know your program pretty well. So you like supersets a lot, supersets and circuits. And so one of the things that I make sure that I do with your program pretty often is I superset you 2 completely opposing sets of muscle groups so that you don't have to rest, right? So let's say you do a lat pull down versus a chest press. There's not a lot of reason that you need to take 60 seconds of rest in between your lat pull down and your chest press. The lats help stabilize a chest press. The pectoral muscles help stabilize a lat pull, but for the most part, they're getting a little bit of rest while you're working, right? So if you do your superset, rest 30 to 60 seconds, and then do your superset again, you're fine because the muscles have rested. In your mind, you haven't rested, right? I used to do this as a trainer pretty often. Even as a young trainer, I had these really type A people who would come into my sessions and I'm like, all right, you need to rest before we do our next set of cable rows. I'm like, I don't want to rest. Like, I'm here to burn calories. I'm like, God, well, you can't just keep doing cable rows, you know? So I would come up with this giant list of ab exercises I can make you do in between the exercise, because everybody loves to do abs, right? And at least you feel like you're working. But the whole point was to get you to freaking rest before we did our next set of cable rows. And so I probably did that to you several times, Angela, when we got to work together in Texas. Yeah. You know, my freaking type A clients. It's okay. I love you anyway.
Guilty. Can't help it.
Awesome. What other questions do we have out there? That was a good one. He's not saying CrossFit is silly, but it is. Thanks for that. I just opened the group chat just to see. Nice. Oh, there's the little noisemaker. There's Gene Puppy. Walter, are you really like feet kicked up, lounging there, or is that a screensaver? Okay, that's awesome. You really are chilling. Cool. He said, "Flip it over."
Sorry, I can't see my camera. I don't know what view you guys are seeing. So
that's awesome. No, I loved it. I love it. That's great. Keep doing that.
Are you back on me, or is it back on my feet?
It's on your feet, which is fine. I'll watch your feet. I love a good set of uninjured feet every now and then.
This is how it works. We unload a plane, we take a quick break, and we wait for the next ones to come.
You know, that's how being a surgical transporter was. It was like you load up the people and you drag them to surgery, and then you chill for a little bit, and then you grab another person and drag them to surgery. If you're real nice about it, they won't kick and scream too much. Right.
So I guess I got a quick question. I've noticed, obviously, the warm-ups since I turned 50 take longer. It takes longer. You know, it used to start jogging, and within a mile, I felt wonderful. And now it's like 2 miles, sometimes 3 miles before I really start to feel the endorphins and the wonderfulness I used to feel at the first mile. And then my heart rate, it takes forever to get it above 90. But then like when I get it up around 170, 180, I crash. It's like I can't keep it there very long because the crash rate, the run out of steam rate is a lot faster.
Yeah. You know, the warm up, it changes as we get older, right? Because I mean, I say that as a young man, and the people who are older than me go, ha, you don't even know yet. But like my joints are a lot older than I am. Okay, like I feel some of the pain. I know not all of the pain. Youth is wasted on the young and all that. But I get it, because there was a time in my life where I was like, I'm going to go for a run, and you just go run. You just put your shoes on and take off, and you're like, warm up, I don't need a warm up. Like my first mile is my warm up, and it's my fastest one. Like, and you're fine. You don't have to pay for it. But as we get older, I think one of the reasons that like we learn how to do warm ups in personal training is because you don't stay young long. All right, like that just doesn't last. Whatever that is, like it doesn't last. So I would say, Jim, one of the things that has been really helpful to some of my older runners, and even me, I'm not older necessarily, but my joints are old. And so one of the things that's been really helpful to me is to incorporate a warm-up routine that is not running, right? Just a few movements. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? It could be some walking high knees. It could be cross-body crunches. It could be things like bird dogs. Just a few, it's 5 to 10 minutes of movement to tell the body, this is what we're going to do. If you're really smart about it, you can do a few things to activate your core and your glutes and your calves to make sure everything's doing what it's supposed to, so that when you do take that first step into your run, it doesn't take very long before it feels good, right? It should be about a half mile to a mile. If it's taking 2 miles, 3 miles before you're actually like, hey man, this run feels pretty good, that means we probably need to invest a little bit of time and energy into creating a good warm-up. That's what that would say to me. That way, I don't want you to have to go 20 minutes before you're like, okay, cardio is kind of cool. Like it shouldn't be like that. It should be about 20 minutes in, you're going like, all right, when's this going to be over? That's unless you're Gene, and then you're like, I've got about 8 times longer. Like just,
Yeah.
20 minutes is what I eat for breakfast. But in general, I want you feeling good within a half mile to a mile. So I would spend some time on, it sounds dumb, but if you remember all the way back in high school, like, getting ready for sports, you did high knees and you did windmills and you did crunches and stuff. And then you went and ran around the field. And that's something that most of us will develop into if we haven't already, to get our bodies ready.
Yep.
Cool.
Did I turn off?
Man.
Am
I
I
don't
still
see
with
you,
you?
but I hear you.
That's weird. I went to this other screen. My video has stopped.
I see you holding a baby now. Oh, okay. Now you're back.
Oh, now I'm back.
A little different.
You're back.
I've never zoomed on my phone, so.
First time for everything. Still glad you get to join us because we haven't gotten.
Yes, and when I saw that pop up, I was like, sweet.
I'm on. Let's do it.
Yes.
Does that help, Jim?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Yeah.
I've been
Get that warm up game going.
Doing this, like every challenge I do, I get a little smarter, especially with nutrition, like inflammatory foods. I had the scopes done, so I know that dairy was a bad thing for me. Gluten sensitivity, I got to watch, just stuff like that.
Cool. That's the best we can do. We get a little smarter every time. That's the hope.
Yeah.
We live a little smarter, keep this body moving a little longer, do cool things with life. That would be good.
Exactly.
Appreciate you, man. Any other questions out there, guys? Got room for one more. Is that you, Zach? JAZT5?
Yeah, that's me.
All right. I recognized your face, but I was like, what is that name? I don't know.
What is this? What is this C word? Cardio.
Cardio.
What is that?
What is that? You missed the first 5 minutes.
I don't know that word. I don't do that word.
It gets really fun. This chart's all you need to know. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to convince you over a Zoom call, but you're a certified trainer. You know it's important. You'll get there.
Yeah, I need to start doing it. I just got to find something fun to do.
My favorite meme is my favorite meme with trainers anyway was like what do you do for weights? Oh man, and it's like this big long list of all the fancy cool stuff they do for lifting weights, and it was like, what do you do for cardio? It's like lift weights faster. Like I don't ask me silly questions. Nice. Anything else out there, guys?
So I noticed in the bottom right hand of the screen that was just up, where it talked about the 4 things. One of them was like light therapy, cryo,
Mhm.
technology.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is this slide came from a rest and recovery workshop that I taught for Trainer EDU. And so this is part of a 4-week piece that I did on rest and recovery, like how to unlock the best in your genetic makeup and then how to recover from the stuff you do to yourself, basically. And so we covered exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, and then we talked about some of the more advanced ways that you can progress recovery. So things like light therapy, cryotherapy, heat therapy, and others. We kind of dove into that stuff. If you're interested, I can send you the slides that we went through there. Just remind me via email or message, and I'd be happy to shoot those your way.
I will.
A little beyond the scope of a quick 20-minute program design conversation, but if you guys ever want to connect on recovery, I can do another one of these town halls on that front, because it's really fascinating stuff. We're getting interestingly intelligent and probably a little overly complicated in the recovery world at the moment, but there's good research around it.
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the cryotherapy. I hate being cold, but I don't know, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, there's some promising studies around it. Some of them are a little hokey, like they've got their big, little tube thing, and they flash freeze you for a brief period of time. But there are some that are a little less hokey. Seems like, nope, not doing it. Like, I saw Mr. Freeze. So was it Demolition Man? The Demolition Man, where they freeze who is that? Bruce Willis? Am I crazy here? They freeze Bruce Willis and bring him back in the future, and he like wipes with seashells or something. It's a really good movie.
Arnold?
I enjoy it. Is it Arnold? I don't know. Wesley Snipes is in it. He's the bad guy. But anyway,
you're right.
So they do have some good therapies around very specific parts of the body. Let's say you suffer with plantar fasciitis on a regular basis. Just your foot can be like, you've probably done it before. You probably stuck your foot in a 20-minute ice bath. It's brutal. It's the worst. That's how they test in psychology, by the way. They test pain, like what the response of pain is on the body. They like skin conductance tests. They're like, here's your hand and here's freezing water. Put it in the freezing water and let's see how long you can do it. You actually do it longer if you cuss at the same time, by the way, which is kind of fun. They proved that. But something about the F-bomb just makes it feel less hard. But the Angela's like, I know, I drop it all the time. I feel great. But the cryotherapy is more like a 30 to 90 second like shot of ultra low temperature. It's almost so fast that your body doesn't even register that it's happening, right? And then afterward, the case for it is that because it's so fast and so directed, it does the same thing without it having to be 20 minutes of hell. And there's a few other interesting studies around it, but I'll send you the information. You might be interested to check it out.
I don't know if I would like to. I don't know if I'd like to do cryotherapy, but once I got well and having had a lot of neuropathy in my legs from being pre-diabetic and all, well, I got where I was wearing shorts every day because I was going walking every day. And then fall came and I wore my shorts, and then winter came and I wore my shorts, and then very cold winter came and I wore my shorts, and then spring came. I never had to change pants one time. But my discovery point in all of that was that from the issues I had with my legs, winter always felt better on my legs. So now I am short pants 12 months a year. And, I get laughed at, and I say, yeah, but my legs feel great. So don't knock it till you try it.
I'm a walking cryotherapy experiment. That's great. I love it. Actually, the most interesting stuff that's come out of that world in the last 20 years is the Wim Hof guy. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he does a lot of breath training. He holds several Guinness Book of World Records for swimming in Arctic waters and hiking naked through the Siberian mountains and in the snow. I'm not kidding. Like, there's your claim to fame on Earth. Guinness Book of World Records for longest hike naked in the snow. Like, boom, made your mark. But anyway, he's a really interesting cat, and they've done a lot of study on him specifically because he uses an interesting method of cold training to get good adaptations from himself. He's got a cool story. Poor guy lost his wife, drove him into a deep depression. He used jumping into very cold water as part of his own therapy and got off of all of his medications and has been talking about it ever since. Jim asked, what's TUT, time under tension? So TUT is time under tension. It's how long the muscle's actually working during a set, right? So if I do 8 repetitions, and they're pretty quick repetitions, they last 3 seconds a piece, maybe 2 seconds a piece, then that's 16 to 24 seconds of time under tension, of how long the muscle itself is working. Time under tension is another way of measuring intensity, right? So CrossFit actually uses time under tension pretty frequently, even though most people in CrossFit don't know what that actually means. If I say do as many reps as you can in 3 minutes, that's a time under tension request. Or if I say do 5 squats, 10 burpees, and 15 pull-ups, usually they do it the other way around, but let's say I said to do that for 5 rounds and do it as quickly as possible. That's a time under tension thing. How long is the muscle under tension during the set, right? And time under tension for most people who are using sets and reps to measure their workouts, time under tension is just a result of how long the repetitions take you. So if you do 20 reps and you do them slowly, it could take a minute. If you do 6 reps and you do them quickly, it could take 10 seconds, right? So that's just another measure of intensity. And one of the ways that you can increase intensity is by increasing load and decreasing time under tension. So, good question. All right, I'm going to go join my wife for the 1 hour that is childless in our day. Don't worry, it's not too exciting. We're watching, what is that? Space Force, Steve Carell. It's I don't know. That's not what we're talking about tonight. I haven't decided whether or not I like it, but Steve Carell cracks me up because of The Office. So that's what we're going to be up to this evening. I hope that everybody